Ex omniverse, okay, people, but you mean other people, but whatever. I'm me, and I'm not responsible for all the people that misinterpret or are attracted to relativism because they believe this bullshit, for example, that nothing matters, it's subjective. There's nothing about things being subjective that would say they don't matter. It's how they matter. It's how they matter. Now, one thing you don't understand about the statement of everything is subjective is, first of all, generally in conversation, we're talking about for humans. There might be some frame of reference in which things aren't subjective, but you're a human. So I can draw things from being human. And it's like the difference between a synthetic or analytic statement. It's analytically true that for cognitive creatures, creatures that handle English sentences, for example, that the phrase everything is subjective, you know, will be true if they try to figure it out. You know, oh, well, there must be something external. No, you can check from inside you with your subjective point of view that I'm guessing you have, and you can confirm or deny that. Now you say this guy expected you to accept it. Well, it's because since you are a material brain and you're receiving subjective perceptions and you have nothing besides that to go on, it's a logical conclusion that for you too things are subjective. And the onus is on you to present some logic by which things aren't subjective. And so far, the only logic like that, and really by definition it ends up having to go this way, is some metaphysical thing, some non physical intuitional attachment to the world that would make you not a subjective creature. So, in this way, in a technical way, there are objective things. I'm a very objective person in terms of being able to do objective reasoning. But we do objective reasoning with subjective uh, elements or objects, perceptions, which are all subjective, filtered down to the ones we think we reduce down to factual ones, those that could be shared, those which are neutral. They may mean something important, but in themselves, the fact should be neutral. And there's still subjective things. You know, we have a whole big set of all of our subjective ideas, and some of them just seem to be what we want to just call that's fantasy or unimportant or it doesn't matter, it's not material. And we take down this set that we say, well, these do seem to matter. And then what? Those are suddenly external, those aren't subjective anymore? No, they're objective. We could call, hey, that subset, that's objective, but it's a subset of subjective things. So it's just a technical reality. It doesn't matter the emotional fact that nihilists through the ages, they'll go to whatever the mainstream says is destructive. You know, the nihilists might go to a religious fundamentalism because that's what's telling them that life needs to be destroyed. Whatever it is that will want to, nothingalize life. And they get to go to relativism and skepticism because the mainstream has taught them that if you want to say nothing matters and you can always win an argument, hey, subjective does not mean different, right? So if I have a subjective idea and you have a subjective idea, it doesn't mean they're different. That's what a fact is trying to discover. It's a fact. You know, this bookcase is yellow. By categorizing that particular perception as a fact, I'm making a prediction, a statement that you too will find that that is yellow. That's a shareable neutral fact. Okay, it's reporting my subjective experience, a particular subset of my subjective experiences that I think will be reproducible in you. But there's the external. I can't do anything to force a blind person or you or colorblind or anybody to see that as yellow. No external fact is going to do that, for one thing, because there's photons of light. It's not bits of yellow, it's little photons of light that I interpret as yellow. And when I measure it with my eyes, so it's just all up to you. It's a voluntary thing. I say, hey, look, it's yellow. Fact. You can say that and look, is it yellow? Saying things are subjective doesn't mean you can go, no, it's blue. Unless you're being honest. Unless you really see blue, and then we'll have to figure out how that could be. The fact that everything's subjective isn't permission to lie. No, it's a requirement, a responsibility to be honest with yourself. And you don't necessarily have to be honest with other people in this schema, but with yourself. Okay, and if that's too much to ask, oh, but if we let people be subjective, they won't be honest with themselves. Well, did I invent that? Did we subjective and relativists? Did we invent the fact that people aren't honest with themselves? This is a method for being honest with yourself, an idea that helps promote being honest with yourself. It requires that you be honest with yourself. And so we can't just assume that being subjective means that you get to make up your own facts. No. It's an acknowledgement that the facts you receive may be different from the facts someone else receives. Okay? It's not an acknowledgement that you can just make the facts up. Do you see the difference? Saying things are subjective does not mean you get to just make things up. But you say a lot of my subjective stuff is just made up. Yeah, that's why you have to filter them down into this subset of shit that is less made up than most things. Now, it's still your eyes and whatnot making it up, so you judge it not based on is it made up or not, because they all are in some degree. You judge it based on its consistency. Is it reproducible, for yourself, which has implications for if it's likely to be reproducible for other people. Right? And also whether it's neutral, whether the fact is neutral. When I say that a tick is a parasite, that's a fact if I simply mean that about how it survives, the way in which it gets nutrients off of other living things. Okay, and it's a description of that. But if by parasite I mean the whole framing of parasite and it's mean, it's a bad character and all of that, well, that's not a fact. That's a characterization. The same sentence. It depends. So that a biologist studying insects is going to use parasite with the neutral sense, right? The values are not in the words, not necessarily even in a sentence. If it's a fact, it's a factual sentence. But the opinions and the judgments then are expressed at larger scales, paragraphs and whole papers. The idea that if people were subjective, they wouldn't bother to converse is just, again, no. You're stuck thinking that the only reason to talk to somebody is, what? Because you are sure? No, not because you are sure, but because you think it's possible to be sure? No, I think it's possible to share facts. Okay, I could become sure in myself, and that's a subjective surety that I'm not going to say just because I'm sure you have to believe. But I could still talk to you to find out what you could become sure of. And often if you just point people, look, there's a red ball. No, there isn't. Yeah, look, it's over there. Oh yeah, I just hadn't looked. It's not because the red ball is external. It's because we could share that factual, repeatable perception. Okay. You don't need objectivity for that. It's my subjectivity and your subjectivity and our connection. But you're like, but things have to exist. Yes, things exist, right? Yeah, things exist. Okay, but that's different. See, people confuse, and you have this confused, no offense, but the idea of something being objective with it being material and existing. Okay, the material could be surreal. It could be not. It could be relativistic. It could have properties that contradict the ideas of objectivity. Things like the uncertainty principle. A material reality can behave that way. Now, we didn't used to. Our intuition made it seem like that wasn't possible. We had hundreds of years of what you would even call modern physics with Newton, where it seemed, not to be possible. That materialism could not be objective. But there's certain principles and assumptions with objective. And the fact is that we have subjective means to narrow in on this idea of material. And as we've narrowed in, we've always thought, well, there's probably an object there and we just can't reach it. But we reach the quantum level where the object is fundamentally unobject-like. Because the object is this wave packet in probability space. And that's fundamentally unlike an object, because whereas an object follows the laws of non-contradiction, like it's either here or here. It can't be both places. The wave packet is spread out in such a way that in principle, it's as if that particular object of the electron or the particle itself, as we would perceive it as an object, is in multiple places at once, or isn't in them, but has a potentiality, and it's this potentiality that's moving along. So our microscopes and everything, our ability to probe, not literally microscopes, of course, but tunneling microscopes, things like this. Our ability to probe has gotten so down narrow, we know these things are